County Building. This is a special meeting of the Board of City Commissioners. We'll call the meeting to order. We can call roll.
Commissioner Risch. Here. Commissioner Cleary.
Here.
Commissioner Zinker.
Here.
Commissioner Connolly. Here. Mayor Schmidt.
Here. We have one item on the agenda. It is related to landfill and potential purchase of 20 acres of land. And Steve, are you presenting or?
I sure can, or Janelle can too. So,
Can't hear him.
so
I can't hear you.
Well, I can probably present then. I believe that Steve was contacted last week by, we had the 20-acre parcel in which there's a home and a business on that property next to the landfill. You had all approved the landfill purchase in July for the balance, the large portion of that section.
291 acres.
And we had previously an executive session given negotiating parameters to Steve to be able to try to purchase also that 20-acre parcel. And you had also agreed that the 20-year occupancy was something that was palatable. We don't need the property right away for the landfill. Yes.
I remember agreeing to purchasing the 291 acres. I don't remember any discussion on the 20 acres. Was there something to discuss on the 20 acres?
Yes, it was part of, we knew it was two separate owners and we knew that the 20 acres was because it has a house on it. But it's contiguous land and it's actually.
And the owner wants to occupy it until.
I understand what you're saying now, the 20 years. But he wants to sell it as well, but occupy it for 20 years.
And I know in the initial discussions, we talked about that as kind of a contract for deed, but legally that's very difficult when it's that way. So we determined, I did a bunch of research, tried to find the best way that makes the most sense. And it's basically like a life estate, perhaps everyone's more familiar with that, except it is for a term of 20 years, not the life of a person. And Steve has indicated we don't need that surface property right now for the landfill. It's going to be in the future anyway. So this way it stays on the tax rolls. This individual will get a purchase price from what the landman or the engineers had indicated. The purchase price was fair. What we did is looked at IRS regulations for a term occupancy on their publications, and a 4% deduction off of the purchase price is, in the IRS's view, a fair valuation of that 20-year occupancy term. So
What's the purchase price?
Steve, you've got that. That's $1,900,000. It's in the purchase agreement.
20 acres?
Yep.
1,910,400.
That's after the 4% is deducted. I believe Dan said you had agreed to a $1,990,000 as the fair market value for the 20 acres with the developed house and business on it. That was what was determined by their agent. And then what I did is whatever their agreement was, the 4% is a fair valuation for the 20-year occupancy. So I deducted that off the price they had agreed to.
4%.
That's the 1.91.
Yeah, yes, the 4% less the 4%. It's the difference between the 1,990,000 minus what the purchase price in our agreement is. We're not indicating it's selling for that entire value because they're retaining a portion.
Pretty good deal. 20 years for only 4%.
Yeah, but Commissioner Zinker, you had your hand raised earlier. Did you have a question? I don't want to.
No, I just a quick statement. Thank you, Mayor, that the executive session was prior to Commissioner Risch being on the commission. That way he might not have all the details. So
Thank you, Commissioner Zinker. I was trying to remember that too. I asked Doug that this morning too, and I couldn't remember when it was. So thank you for refreshing our memory. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner. Or-
Oh, well, I'm familiar with the land. There's a guy's got a house on top of the hill and he's got a piece of pasture that he allows campers and boats to park on. I have a friend that's got a camper and a boat, and we go up there and get the camper and boat. I would call it probably the most least desirable land in the city or around the city. It's on top of the hill. It's got the interstate next to it. I used to live next to Interstate 94, the most miserable place to live you can find. It's gonna have the landfill next to it. The only road is a gravel trail, and the idea that it's worth $95,000 an acre is just absurd to me. And we just bought 291 acres, which is probably 200 acres more than we need for the foreseeable future. To commit $2 million for $100,000 worth of property, I'm a no on this.
And it was the same owner for two. It's just this had to be,
No,
right? It was different
No.
numbers? Okay.
yep, the 291 acres is a partnership, Rock Hills Partnership, and that's closing tomorrow. And I believe that Sheldon is one of the partners in that Rock Hills, but there's other people that are partners in that entity.
Appreciate the clarification.
Well, I'd like to sell some of the land I have to the city.
This, this 20 acres is zoned, industrial. And so that's what, it's in zoned industrial and he's got a special permit. I think he can stay in the house for 2 years. If the house is vacated for 2 years, then they can no longer stay in that because of the way the land is zoned. So the industrial zoning of it and the location is kind of what drives the price, to what it is. So the other land that we're buying, yes, it's all contiguous, and then this 20 acres was right in between, be sandwiched between the property and the interstate. And so when we went into an executive session, we kind of gave a value of what the 300 acres was worth and what the 20 acres was worth at the time. And the value that we talked about back then, the negotiations came in $10,000 less than what we presented during executive session.
And maybe Steve, can you, if you still got that from Dan, what those numbers were that he had calculated for the acres? Do you still have that?
From what we presented at executive session, it was, it was 2 million for this parcel. And it was, I think, 3.5 for the other parcel. If my memory is okay. What we ended up doing is negotiating $10,000 more on the other parcel, and this one we reduced 10,000. That was the negotiation between the three partners. So the numbers that we presented during the executive session, they're spot on. Is on the high end. We were kind of given a range up to a certain amount, and between the two parcels, it fell right at that high range.
Well, the other stuff was $15,433 an acre or something to that effect, and this stuff is $95,000 an acre. Yeah, I don't get it, and I understand it's zoned industrial. Wow, we can rezone things all over the city. I've been up there.
We save millions because we don't have to move the landfill and infrastructure.
Correct. But this isn't part of that.
Well, and we're probably the main buyer for this property. I mean, we spoke with the Robidoux prior to Rock Hills buying it, trying to get this property. And because it is, and they know it's going to be a landfill, so people weren't wanting it to be sold to the city either. But so you're probably right in terms of we're the main seller, other buyer, other than industrial along that, because that's 66, right? That's just
66.
to the
66 is on the west side, 80th is on the east side.
and with future plans with DOT is making that a interchange. I think they know that that's got some valuation as well, but we were relying on the engineering folks that gave us the estimates.
I mean, so not that this has an entire factor, but we are displacing a homeowner with ultimately in this purchase. And so I think that is part of the factor of the value. It's not the entire factor, obviously, but it is a part of the factor of the value. And so you look at raw land, probably a different discussion, but we have someone who's got a home on there, is actually operating a business out of there that drives value up. I'm not saying it's, I think when we were in executive session, we said, if we can get the whole parcel for X dollars or within this range of dollars, that's where, that was prior to you being on the commission. And so that's where I think we all landed at. And Commissioner Zinker, you've got your hand up, so maybe you have a little better recollection than I do.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. So I'll just put this out there that obviously in the executive session and with the land deal that's going to close tomorrow, that this sets the city of Bismarck up for the next 80 to 90 years for landfill. If we wouldn't have got the first piece done, we would be looking and setting up future commissions and the citizens of Bismarck to spend tens of millions of dollars to relocate buildings, to relocate infrastructure. So I understand, Commissioner Risch, your concern for the value of what we're currently paying, but what we're saving for the future is much more than what the cost of these acres are. So I understand your concern. I respect your concern. With that, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Do we have further discussion?
Yeah.
Commissioner Risch. And Commissioner Clear, I think, has got a comment too, so.
Yeah, hopefully you guys can hear me. Similar to Commissioner Zenker, I think that the big piece of it for me when we were discussing it prior was this is our best way to have continuation throughout the landfill, which is going to save a ton of money moving forward. But also, I think we kind of knew when we were talking price that, like, in order to get both pieces, we just wanted to make sure it was under a certain dollar amount at the end of the day for both pieces. And so if we're there, even though we're paying more for one versus the other, I think if we're at that, we're still under that total dollar. That's where I was comfortable. And then again, like Commissioner Zenker said, just setting us up to not have to spend way more money in the future is kind of the sticking point for me. The other options that we talked about in the landfill discussions is how we would have to go, on the other side of the interstate, things like that, when we're looking at expanding, and that's just going to end up costing a lot more money in the future. And so, though it seems very expensive per acre, I think the balance between the two sales and then just what it's setting us up for, I think I support. So.
Well, with all due respects, I agree with everybody that we needed to buy the land next to the landfill, the 291 acres. There's no dispute about that. It's the outrageous amount of money for this 20 acres. And we don't have to displace a landowner. He can keep his land. He can sell it as a house to somebody else, rezone it. I don't know. I fail to see why this additional 20 acres is necessary when we just bought 291 acres, which should take us, I don't know, for a landfill. I don't think certainly none of our lifetimes we have an issue with that, needing to expand beyond that. So I don't have an issue, only with the 20 acres at $95,000 an acre. That is zoned industrial, but if you call it a business, parking a bunch of campers on the hillside, I guess that's a business. But it's not some sort of big enterprise we're talking about.
And I respect your comments. That certainly is legit. I don't think that any of us are here. I guess I would have to ask Steve what excluding the 20 acres roughly from the total picture does to the operation. As far as we can see out, I mean, that's obviously a number of years out. We probably don't know for sure, but what would the impact be? Because it may be an access point. I don't know.
There are setback rules. So if you have a home on a piece of property, a landfill has to be set back X amount of distance from that. So if we acquire that and we have a straight line on the north side, we have continuous ability to have a landfill south of that. If the home would stay, that's going to put a jog into what we have to the south area of what we could actually use for landfill. So it does have a negative impact by not having the entire piece. Can we work with it? Yeah, we could, but it's just not ideal.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I'm curious why we're having a special commission meeting. You got a closing on the 291 acres tomorrow, right? Is that why all of a sudden this flew up, that we needed to have a special meeting?
They want to close on this 20 acres tomorrow.
I
The
don't know
title
where that
team,
went.
and I mean, title team has rushed. My office has rushed to try to accommodate the request of the department. When we were working through and finally got the terms sorted out, then I asked, where's the commission action? And we realized there wasn't one, because I think it was last week is when he contacted you. Was it Thursday
Yep.
or Friday?
Yeah, it was late in the week last week that we came to terms of what's in the purchase agreement. And then he just said, well, he wants to close the same time as the larger parcel because of some IRS issues with some land swap. Janelle knows the terms of it better than I do, but it's
The
more
1031.
for tax purposes.
And 31 exchange.
That's what they asked for.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Wouldn't we still have the setback issues for 20 years, being his house is still there? So we got
Yes,
20
we-
years, we gotta, can't mess with the land
Yes, we-
adjacent.
Yes, we do. However, we don't anticipate needing to expand over there within that 20-year time frame. That is the reason we agreed to the 20-year time frame. Because we don't anticipate needing the land. We just wanted to have purchased the entire tract to make sure we had it in our name, so we didn't have to move 20, 40 miles out for a future tract for a landfill 40 years down the road.
Is there any other discussion? See any, so we'll call roll.
Commissioner Clary,
Yes.
Commissioner Rish,
No.
Commissioner Zinker,
Yes.
Commissioner Conley,
Yes.
Mayor Schmitz.
Yes, motion carries. That's the only item on the agenda, so I thank everyone. I also thank everyone for taking time for this special meeting and no stress. Thank you.
Have a good day.
It's recording on it. We have to stop.
Caleb, can you stop the